What's going on, everybody? Free to play OG here, and today I am excited to be bringing you part 2 of our ultimate free to play and new player guide to custom gear in Marvel Future Fight, CTPs. In today's video, we're going to be going over everything CTP, from where to find the suckers to how to reforge them and everything in between. That sounds like something you're interested in learning about, then you are in the right place, my friends. As we get into this, it's going to be a doozy, and it'll be pretty clear pretty quickly why we divided this up into 2 parts. I learned a lot while putting this guide together, so I'm hoping that that translates into there being something cool and new for almost everybody in this guide. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. First thing we're going to do here, guys, is talk about what a CTP even is. And to do that, we're going to head to the Marvel Universe tab, go to the Custom Gear tab, and look at our CTPs. So, a CTP is essentially a unique obelisk. It is like an obelisk, but it has unique stats that will always show up with the same stats. Different values of those stats, but they will always be the same. A CTP of Transcendence will always have all basic attacks, ignore dodge, an activated proc that decreases reflected damage that you receive and provides invincibility for 5 seconds. That is what a Transcendence will always be. There are 14 CTPs currently in Marvel Future Fight, all the way from Transcendence to Conquest here, and then the Liberation, which was just recently added. I think it's neat to point out that CTP actually stands for Celestial Tech Pack. And the reason they're named such is because these are supposed to represent pieces of ancient celestial technology that we're using on our characters to increase our power. And actually, not a month ago, I personally realized after all my years of playing that these CTPs are actually modeled after the heads of Celestials from the comic books themselves. It's actually a really interesting to look at, thing to look at. I put together some of it in the thumbnail for us. It's a hoot. Go ahead and check that out if you find it interesting. Another thing about CTPs that's very important is that they can be reforged. And we're going to get into everything reforging here in just a little bit, but it basically means that they can be upgraded through a process which obelisks cannot. Another thing to note about CTPs is they're relatively rare in this game. They are similar to P cards in rarity. Little more common. So when you're equipping these, you do want to be cautious with them. They cost 600 crystals to unequip past the initial 2 weeks of your account, where you can unequip for free, and 300 crystals on discount during unequip events. So keep that in mind, and you're going to want to put your CTPs on the stronger characters on your account generally. All right, guys, so the first thing we're going to do is show you where all the CTPs can be found, and it's going to be quite a list, so I'm going to try to move through it fast, and hopefully I will get just about everything here. Let's see how we do. 3, 2, 1, go. First spot we're going to look is the monthly check-in reward. Check-in for 28 days straight, and on the 4th week, at the very end, you will receive a Dimension Chest CTP. Next place to talk about is events. Events like Timeline Quest, that was just recently added to the game, can actually provide a CTP from the event itself, which is very, very nice. You can also get a CTP from the event that is currently running in the game. This is the token event that is usually released with major updates. We get these about once a month. We do get them once a month, excuse me. And you can get a premium card here or a CTP. Most people will recommend that you take the premium card every time. I just want to point out that this is a place you can get a CTP chest. Moving on, we're going to talk about some of the shops in-game where you can get CTPs. And the first one we're going to take a look at is the newly added Team Battle Arena store. And in the shop here, you can see with 5,500 tokens from Team Battle Arena, you can acquire yourself a fancy dancy CTP chest. Next stop is going to be Otherworld Battle. We'll pop over here, head to the Battlefield shop. Under upgrade item, you can get for 40,000 mementos, Warriors mementos, there it is, a Dimension Chest CTP. One more shop to look at. And when we look at this shop, I'm going to explain something to y'all. The Shadowlands shop here also has a CTP available for 11,000 tokens. Now, out of those 3 shops, the only one I really recommend that you save up for CTPs with is this one here. And that's going to be because the Shadowlands shop actually has the worst conversion between tier 4 materials and the chest itself. All of the different chests cost about 4.3 or 4.5 tier 4 material purchases worth of coins. Here the difference is, instead of getting 300 carbonadium, you're only getting 200. So this is the place where I would probably save, and what I am doing currently is saving for a CTP from the Shadowlands shop. Alrighty, moving on. In Shadowlands, stage 135, if you can clear it, your first clear, you will get a CTP selector from stage 135. Next place we're going to take a look, guys, is in World Boss Legend. World Boss Legend starting at stage 20. The booty boxes that drop here can drop premium items, including CTPs. I'm not going to bother clicking on this and loading the rewards as there aren't CTPs in this chest. And then the boxes from stage 50 plus, it's my understanding, those have the maximum chance to drop premium items. So those are going to be what you're trying to farm. The other thing to point out is the mighty CTPs that can just flat drop from World Boss Legend. The chance for these definitely increase as you climb higher. I have heard it said that they increase per 10 stages you complete. I don't know that that's true. It may be a gradient. I'm not sure how we would know that. But what we do know is that you're more likely to get mighty CTPs the farther you push into World Boss Legend. All right, guys, moving on. We're going to talk about old GBR, and you may not believe it, but by golly, just today 2 people got CTPs of Rage out of GBR. You can actually get a CTP here. It is very, very rare, but it does happen. It does happen. And I think there are ways to manipulate that. Again, without going in here, there's some bonus characters that you can have leveled to a certain point that will increase your chances of getting loot. And you can also use bonus points, boost points, to increase your reward rolls, increasing your chances to get a CTP. But one of the rarer places to get one for sure. Our next stop is gonna be the dispatch mode. Of course, farming dispatch with energy after stage 7-1 gives you a chance of getting premium items, which can include a CTP. 2 more to mention here before we get into ones that you actually need to pay crystals for, and that's gonna be hidden tickets that you use in dimension missions can actually proc a CTP of Transcendence. Believe it or not. So you can get CTPs from hidden tickets. It is very rare and it will always be a Transcendence. You can get CTPs of Patience from running stages that you complete with boost points. And those extra boost points have a chance to generate an extra reward of a CTP of Patience. Again, it's very rare, but it is a possibility. And especially with boost points these days, I don't think a lot of people are seeing the CTP of Patience from boost points. But it's there. All right, let's get into some of the stuff you can get for crystals in the game. So there are legendary battles, and there's a whole video on these, so I'll make it brief, but you can get CTPs. Excuse me, I have this one bought. You can get CTPs out of the extreme versions of these if you purchase them. There's a couple selectors in there as well that you can chase down. The next thing we can take a look at is going to be Multiverse Saga. When you purchase Multiverse Saga, you are given a CTP selector straight out the gate. And you can also get, I believe it's 2 CTPs from the emblem tracks themselves as a free-to-play player. I'm not sure if you get more. I think you actually even get into selector territory from the emblem tracks if you're getting emblems from the shops and leveling up all your emblems. All right. Next thing to talk about, and I guess I should have done this when we were there before, but the dispatch shop. I guess this makes sense. Every once in a while, if you purchase enough things from the shop here, the luxury item will fill up all the way and reveal the luxury item for this shop refresh. Sometimes that luxury item will be a CTP. They are usually priced atrociously at like, I think it's like 2,500 crystals or something like that, maybe even a little bit more. On discount, by the way. And unless it is a very, very favorable CTP that you definitely need, that might be a skip for some, depending on the CTP and the cost and how that factors into your spending. But they can show up there. And then the last, and in my opinion, the least place you can get them is in the shop. You can come in here and gamble on dimension chests for CTPs. Woo! All right, so that is just about everywhere I know of in the game to get a CTP. I may have missed one or two, but by golly, that was quite a list. All right, guys, now we need to get into the nitty gritty. We need to start breaking down the individual CTPs, and we're going to talk about rerolling and reforging. Let's do the rerolling and reforging first so we understand Mighties and Brilliance a little better before we start breaking down all the individual CTPs. So we're going to head into the roster here. We're going to take a look at our Doctor Strange, go to the custom gear slot where your CTPs will be equipped. We have a CTP of Rage on our Doctor Strange, and the first thing we're going to take a look at is re-rolling CTPs. So re-rolling the base stats. This is a normal CTP of Rage, no Mighty, no Brilliant. It has crit rate, dodge, and an activated proc that gives it 0.9 damage per 1% dodge and crit. When you re-roll this, these are the stats that'll change. This little trophy cup over here will show you the maximum values that can roll, so you can see what you're after. And in the case of a CTP of Rage, you're very much after the 0.9% damage per 1 of dodge and crit rate. All you need to do to re-roll that is go to the change options section, click on an obelisk that you're willing to sacrifice, spend 10,000 gold and re-roll, and it will change these bottom stats. Re-roll it much like an obelisk. It's pretty much the same thing. So re-rolls are simple. Let's get into reforging, and this is where it gets spicy. In order to make a Mighty or a Brilliant CTP in Marvel Future Fight, you need to reforge it. What is reforging? Well, let's take a look. We go to the Reforge menu. To reforge a CTP, you simply need another identical CTP of the same type. So in order to make a Mighty CTP of Rage, we would simply take a second CTP of Rage, sacrifice it to the first one, it will be destroyed, and it will turn this into a Mighty CTP of Rage. That's pretty much all there is to that. When you roll a Mighty, there are two different procs or top stats, I like to call them, that can roll on the CTP, and I'll demonstrate how that works in a moment. But all you need to know is one more CTP of the exact same kind, smash them together, you've got a Mighty. All right, that's fine. Let's talk about Brilliant CTPs. Right out the gate, I'm going to give a disclaimer to all my free-to-play and new players. Brilliants are an end game and spenders territory. Let me demonstrate how this works. You can see right now, because we're in the anniversary and basically every event is running, we have a super success chance up by 3%. I'm going to mention this now, and I'll mention it again. Do not reforge for Brilliance unless you have the super success chance up, the acquisition up by times 3. Just don't do it. It would be so foolish. It would be 3 times less intelligent than doing it now. All right. So in order to make a Brilliant, in order to get super success chance, believe it or not, what we've got to do is sacrifice other CTPs along with our second Rage. These can be any CTPs, and I'm going to throw some CTPs in here to demonstrate. Do not, I can't imagine what state your account would have to be in to feed a CTP of Conquest and a CTP of Energy to attempt to get a Brilliant. So I just want to point out, understand that these are not CTPs you would normally sacrifice. However, a Transcendence you would. So pop a Transcendence in there. We now have a 3% chance to get a Brilliant CTP. Wait. Don't do that. Don't ever try to go for a Brilliant with less than the maximum amount of chance to get a Brilliant. That means we need to add more CTPs. I'm going to add another one. Notice that takes us up to 6 with 2 CTPs. Let's add a third. Takes us up to 9. Okay, 3%, 3%, 3%. I'm going to add one more and really pay attention here. 15%. The 4th CTP you add does not add 3%, it adds 6. This is why it's so important, vital, that you never roll for a brilliant CTP without the maximum amount, which by the way is 21%, which will be 6 additional CTPs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I don't have that many. So I can't demonstrate. Actually, I think it's 5, 6 with the rage here, but I can't demonstrate because I don't have that many. But just very important to tell you not to do this unless this is a 21% chance. And then all you do is click the button and you pray. You hope that you get your brilliant. You got a 21% chance. And what is a brilliant CTP? A brilliant CTP is basically just a cranked up mighty CTP. It's going to be the same thing, but with a much stronger top stat proc or top stat, and the bottom stats also can roll higher values on a brilliant. They're the same as a regular CTP on a mighty, but they can actually roll higher ranges on a brilliant. Okay, so that's how you reforge. Okay, let's take a little closer look at what reforging gets you and how mighty and brilliant CTPs work in the game, because it's really important for people to know this. So we're gonna take a look at Thor, because here is our only mighty CTP on this account. We have a mighty CTP of Judgment on our Thor. Hooray. You can see here we've got the base stats of a Judgment, but we also have these yellow top stat. And there are 2 different top stats that can roll on any given mighty CTP. Notice the underline on the type amplification proc here, right? Let's go ahead and click on that, because when you see an underline on this, this is huge. I'm like destroying the viewership on my own videos here. You can click on this and it's going to take you to the skill name glossary. Can't believe it, but I'm going to show this to you guys. In the skill name glossary, you can look at what things in this game are. Type amplification increases damage for type skills and grants guard break immunity. Important to read these because you wouldn't know about this unless you came in here and read this about the proc, or the top stats, excuse me. Skill damage affected by type amplification increases more with higher concentration. If you're wondering what concentration does, notice the underlines, meaning you can click on these and find out what they do. The exclusive gauge must be fully charged to use type amplification, and the gauge charges up when moving. The gauge stops charging for a set duration after type amplification was used. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna show this to you guys. We're gonna break down the whole thing. We're gonna head over to World Boss. We're gonna jump into Mephisto. A lot of visibility here, so it'll be really easy to demonstrate what I'm talking about. We're gonna go into training. And when we load in here, the first thing I want new players mostly to look at here, notice our health bar, the blue health bar above Thor when we get in here, okay? Underneath the health bar, compare it to Nyx. You can see there's another little bar there that's kind of empty. Now, when we're standing here, this bar is gonna stay empty. But as soon as we move, he hit us and moved us, you notice it starts to fill up. This is the type amplification proc down here. And if we run around a little more, boom, now it's full, right? So now if I go to hit Mephisto, we're not only gonna see the Judgment proc in the upper left, now we're gonna see a second proc activate as well, which is the type amplification proc from the mighty CTP. So here we go, I'm gonna attack, go ahead and watch in the upper left. Boom, both procs. So there you can see the proc from our Judgment itself and the proc from the type amplification. Now you can see that bar's gone because we used it. We run around, boom, we use it for another rotation. And the way that fits in is nice and neat. You'll do a rotation, there's the delay before the charge starts. Of course, we're gonna get cutscened. As soon as he's done, boom, there it's charging. So there you go. Now you can see how those work. That's how a mighty Judgment top stat proc works. Now I need to break down one more thing that's really important here. The top stats, the procs, they're not all procs. That's why I keep kind of saying proc and top stat. You're usually going for a proc, but you can also roll a flat all attack, all defense thing here, which is technically not a proc, but not usually the one you prefer. Okay, so looking at the CTP of Judgment, it has the type amplification proc, right? If we go back in here, there's a steal proc, there's a strike proc, there's an ambush proc, there's a fortitude proc. As we get into these CTPs, which we're going to do right now, you will see that each mighty has its own top stats that it rolls. So I was only able to demonstrate the type amplification stat for a mighty Judgement. If you have, say, an ambush proc, and we read this, right here it says the exclusive gauge must be fully charged to use ambush, just like our Judgement, and the gauge charges with each hit received. So if you have an ambush proc on your mighty CTP, it's going to be a proc that charges by taking damage. So just know that there are different procs for different mighty CTPs, and some of them charge differently. So just use that glossary and pay attention to how they charge and act accordingly. All right, we're going to take a look at one more thing here. In the custom gear tab, I just want to show you guys this. When you roll a mighty, it's going to roll one of these two options. This is a CTP of authority. You're either going to get the steel proc, which in this case is actually the one you're looking for, or you're going to roll all attacks, all defense. If you roll the wrong one on a mighty, you simply re-roll it with an obelisk. It will re-roll the top stats and the bottom stats. When I told you brilliance were an end game or spenders territory, if you're not feeling it just from how they're crafted, let me tell you this. In order to re-roll a brilliant CTP, you need to sacrifice a CTP to re-roll it. Know that about brilliance. You're going to want to be careful when you start getting into these things, because re-rolling them is very expensive, so is crafting them. Everything about these screams endgame, so don't feel bad if you don't have them yet. I guess that's really what I'm saying. All right, my friends. Woo! Now we know how to forge brilliance. Now we know how to reforge mighties. Now we know what the top stats look like. Now we know what the bottom stats look like. Let's get into breaking down every CTP in the game. And you better believe I've got infographics for us to do this. Let's get into it. All right, on our first slide here, we're going to be taking a look at the Transcendence first. And let me break down a couple things about these slides really fast. Under the little Reforge note here, if you see a no, that means you should not be slamming these together. Leave them alone. Do not reforge them. And you're going to see that when they're used for fodder and fodder alone. You use these to make brilliance. You don't equip them, right? You're also going to see reforge mandatory. What this means is that before you reforge this CTP, you're not really going to want to equip it on any characters. And I said I would break down this mystery in this video, why people say that needs to be reforged. Don't equip that CTP. You have to reforge that CTP. And I'm going to explain that for you right now. These CTPs where you see mandatory on it, the base stats of the CTP are worse, as good, or barely better than a well-rolled obelisk. And when that is the case, it would not be wise to assume that a character you're going to equip this okay CTP of authority on is still going to be relevant when you get the second CTP to turn it into a mighty CTP. That is why people recommend that you reforge these into mighties before you even equip them. So when you see mandatory, these are the CTPs that you need to be reforging before you equip them. Otherwise, you're putting yourself in a position where you may set yourself up with some extra costs that you didn't want to have, removing CTPs in the future. And the last thing is when you just see yes, which means this CTP is a good to equip in its base form, and if you reforge it, it's simply gonna be an upgrade. Here we go. CTP of Transcendence. Increases all basic attacks, gives you ignore dodge, has an activation proc when HP is below 50%, applies to you, decreases damage received from reflected attacks by 50%. This line here is very confusing, but from what I can tell, this really just is stating the effect reflect all attacks is the effect that you're reducing. You do not actually reflect attacks with this CTP. It's very confusing, and I'm happy we can clear that up. You will not get reflect on your character from equipping this CTP. You also gain invincibility for 5 seconds. Why is this so bad? Well, because all attacks is okay, ignore dodge is okay, these are good stats, but reducing reflected damage is just simply god-awful on your custom gear. It's terrible. And invincibility is something common that you can get on an obelisk and is very, very easy to pierce through and penetrate through. So this is considered by far one of the worst CTPs in the game. You should not reforge it. You should not be putting it on anyone as far as I'm concerned. You should be saving it to roll for brilliance and to re-roll brilliance once you have them. Moving on. CTP of Authority. Applies to you, guard break immunity, gives you crit rate damage, an activation proc when your HP is below 50%, applies a buff to you that gives you invincibility for 5 seconds, and gives you accumulation based on damage taken. It's going to increase your basic attacks by 5% per 1% of pure damage received. Accumulates pure damage up to 10% of your max HP. This is simply putting a limit on the amount of damage you can accumulate, and this just means when you get punched, you're going to take a portion of your HP and damage and add that to your attacks. When you reforge this CTP, you can get the steel proc, and the steel proc will give you a really nice damage decrease and super guard break immunity, and those things are very nice, and those turn this into a CTP that is worth equipping on your less powerful PvP characters. The other thing I want to really drive home about these slides is that these character recommendations are not a top 10 list. These are not the top 4 or 5 characters for these CTPs. These are simply examples of characters that these CTPs will work on, right? And so the reason I put Black Widow out front here is because to me, she's an example of a far less valuable PvP character that I would likely put a Mighty Authority on. Someone like Black Widow or Spider-Man. Somebody that is not gonna get my greed or my conquest, right? And that's why Silver Surfer's towards the end here. Even though these aren't lined up, I didn't want to put him up front because your Silver Surfer's really strong. And even though he can use this CTP, he'll probably be better off with something else. So I just wanted to clarify that please do not just throw these on the characters I'm showing you. These are target examples, not a top 10 list. Go see Cynic Alex's top 10 characters for each CTP if you're looking for that. Okay, moving on. Energy. CTP of Energy gives you ignore dodge, crit damage, and an activated proc when attacking. Applies a buff to you that increases your chain hit damage when attacking by 30% for 5 seconds. It also increases your basic damage by 200% or 1 attack. We recognize that if we watched part 1 of the guide. This is a beefed up single skill damage proc. Exactly what she is. Chain hit damage, good stats, 200% damage proc. Great to equip on good World Boss Legend characters or characters that can line up on a single skill. Reforging it is great. It simply adds the beatdown proc preferably. The beatdown proc will give you additional pierce damage, I believe. You can also use CTPs of Energy rarely in really niche situations, and I put this on here because a lot of people talk about this and I wanted to explain it, like Adam Warlock for PvP. This is a really niche situation, and if you do use it for PvP, the way I understand it is you want the all attack, all defense on it. But basically, Adam Warlock's kit is pretty unique in that it allows him to essentially kill people before they can even move, was the idea with the energy. I'm not sure this is as effective anymore with new characters in the game, but that's why you may have heard about a CTP of Energy going on someone like Adam Warlock, and you may see CTPs of Energy on someone like Adam Warlock. Also, when he came out, he was decent to goodish in PvE, and so people were kind of flexing with the CTP of Energy. But I did want to explain why you hear that sometimes. Mainly, they're going to be great on World Boss Legend killers like Iron Man, Sharon Rogers, and Star-Lord that can line up a single skill damage proc very well. Next, let's talk about the CTP of Destruction. And this is a weird one, and right out the gate, I'll admit this is one of the CTPs I'm actually the least comfortable with. CTP of Destruction gives you crit damage, and applies a buff to you, giving you guard break immunity, or applies to you guard break immunity, has an activated proc when attacking, applies a buff to you, giving you a 30% chance to penetrate super armor barrier, all damage immune invincible, and gives you a 200% single skill damage proc. Stock, this is not very good. This is a weird CTP without reforging. You have guard break immunity, which is a PvP stat, and a single skill damage proc and poor penetration. So you've got some weird PvP stuff along with a single skill damage proc, which usually isn't preferred for PvP. So people will tell you that it is mandatory, and rightfully so, to reforge these to get the strike proc on them, to give you that extra bump that you need. It is, I'm trying to remember the percentage, 130%, I believe, damage to boss types that you get from the strike proc, as well as some ignore dodge. So the reforge is really strong. However, destruction and energy have a weird competition in my mind, and when I learned a little bit about this, I think the best targets for it, it sounds like, are characters that can do really spiky damage with the proc and don't do as well with like a rage type proc, so and can benefit from the PvP stats, right? So Hela is a good option. She does really well with the boss damage in PvE and can also utilize these in PvP a little bit. It's the same thing for Zombie Strange. Cable, I'm going on other people's advice. I don't know, but I've heard that he does well with the destruction, and Sharon as well. However, with Sharon, it's the perfect opportunity to mention that several people told me that when you have 25% pierce, that is when a destruction can creep ahead of an energy in some weird places. Because beatdown, the reforge proc on energy, gives you extra pierce damage, due to the diminishing returns on pierce, the boss damage increase can actually outweigh that in certain situations. That's what I know about destructions, guys. Let's move on to the next slide. And here we are going to be talking about the CTP of Patience first. I'll try and go through this one quick. It's another one of our doo-doo CTPs. Dodge plus 32%. I'm going to avoid the percentages. These are the max percentages, so it'll be, varying ranges here. Dodge, all basic attacks. When HP is below 50%, applies a buff to you, decreasing the damage received from afflicted attacks, and gives you invincibility for 5 seconds. This is just the Transcendence and Evil Twin. Save these for rerolls. Do not reforge them. They are fodder CTPs. Moving on to the Refinement, and this one's interesting. This is a CTP. Well, let's go over the stats. Refinement gives you max HP. It gives you a good, healthy amount of recovery rate. An activated proc when your HP is below 50%. Applies a buff to you, recovering your HP by 20% and providing a barrier with 6 charges. This is not good in its base form. This is a bad CTP. Obelisks are better than this. This is a mandatory reforge. However, the only character I'm really aware of this working particularly well on, and people feel free to correct me here if I'm wrong on this in the comments. There's probably some veterans that know some other uses for this. The only real usage I understand for this that there really is right now is reforging it, getting the vitality proc, and putting it on Carnage. And the deal there is this gives you another heal per second, the vitality proc. And basically it allows you to stack 3 heals on Carnage, which just gives him an absurd amount of healing. And the max HP contributes to that with the recovery rate, and it all kind of stacks up into this really powerful package. However, even that appears to be being usurped by some of the higher end CTPs for PvP towards the later game. Some of the larger accounts or late game accounts that I looked at. So I did put Carnage here as a recommendation, but honestly, it feels like refinements are mostly something you may want to save as fodder depending on the state of your account. If you, like me, aren't going to be gambling in the shop and building up a huge stockpile of CTPs, I can't see myself equipping these, just being honest. Again, if veterans have some more information on other places these are beneficial, feel free to leave it in the comments. Let's talk about a CTP of Veteran. The CTP of Veteran grants guard break immunity, ignore dodge, crit damage increase, increases all basic attacks and defenses, has an activated proc when attacking, applies a buff to you increasing chain hit damage, increasing basic damage by 150 for one attack, and giving you a shield for 30% of your match HP that cancels, ignores, cancel, and pierce effects, and it blocks instinct damage. This CTP is nuts. Somebody forgot to tell this thing to calm down, and it just kept getting more and more excited till it was totally out of control. The bad news, the only place to get this is from the secret vaults in the collector's vault. They're very, very difficult to acquire. You're racing against literally everyone else that's after it, and only one is given out per secret vault in the collector's vault for the CTP of Veteran. They're incredibly rare. Reforge, I'd love to see it. Somebody has a mighty or a brilliant CTP of Veteran out there. I don't know where it is. I'd love to see it. That would be crazy. Target examples, God, the one above all. I have no idea who you would put this on if you managed to get one. They're very good. I would have to break it down with the individual. I mean, it's crazy. It's a single still damage proc. Chain hit increase. I mean, it's crazy. This CTP's got a bit of everything. So this is nuts. If you have one of these, amazing. Tell me who you put it on. It'll be hilarious. Drop it in the comments. CTP of Greed. This is a big one. This is the first CTP where it's actually, I couldn't get the whole thing in here, but I'll explain what's missing as it's just a different version of what's right here. Okay, so a CTP of Greed grants guard break immunity with its base form. Also grants ignore dodge. It applies a buff to you when attacking, I believe. I think it's cut off on the top. But that recovers 10% of your HP and increases the basic damage dealt to speed in universal types by 150% for 5 seconds. And then swaps to increase basic damage to combat blast types by 150%. The other version of this that can roll is just inverted. It'll do combat and blast first and speed universal second. So basically it just rotates back and forth between these two procs. This can be very good in PvP. Most people will tell you you want to roll the universal first, as most of the big PvP bads currently are universal types, and that'll allow you to get your damage spike against that type first. Should you reforge this CTP? Yes, you should. I didn't put mandatory because I believe that this is better than most obelisks in its base state. I could be wrong, but it's as good as. So if it's mandatory to reforge this, just be, or I should say, if you don't reforge this first, make sure the target you're putting on is one you want a mighty greed on, and that you're going to turn it into a mighty because the ambush proc is fantastic. You're going to want it 100%. So reforge absolutely on this one, and you're going to want to go for that ambush proc. Target examples are the big PvP bads. Null loves a mighty greed. Everyone's talking about that right now. Sentry could be in the second slot here. It doesn't really matter. That's not the point of these. Wolverine loves a mighty greed. Sentry loves a mighty greed. Adam Warlock would love a mighty greed. And I had to give a shout out to my girl here, sitting in the corner like, hey, what about me, guys? Magic would love a CTP, a mighty CTP greed. We'll see if she ever gets one from me. All right, guys, moving on to the next one. We got more to go. I told you how many of these there were in the game. Let's keep moving. We got the CTP of Rage here. Gives you crit rate and dodge. Very nice. Activation rate 20% when dealing a critical attack. This one's important. You need to crit to activate a CTP of Rage. This is why you'll often hear people talking about guaranteed crit rate in conjunction with a CTP of Rage. It'll apply a buff to you that increases 0.9% basic damage per 1%, sound familiar, of dodge rate and critical rate, regardless of guaranteed dodge rate and guaranteed crit rate. It also ignores bosses' damage decreases by 60%. And this, like a mini rage, is a damage window for 5 seconds. This is the daddy rage. This is the one that the mini rage is named after, folks. It's incredible. It's so good for ABXL. So good for so many characters in World Boss Legends. It's one of the rock stars. In fact, it is the PvE rock star. Let's just come out and call it what it is. Should you reforge it? Yes, if you can. A mighty CTP of Rage is fantastic. You get that enraged proc and you will be cooking. Some target examples, to no surprise, are some of the ABXL biggies. You got Luna Snow here, Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, Gwenpool, and Gladiator just chilling. These are some of the people that would absolutely love a CTP of Rage. Moving on, we've got the CTP of Regeneration, folks. This is another one that's a little weird, and I kind of feel like maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not. Max HP on this one, guard break immunity and recovery rate increase. Has an activated proc on it when your HP is below 50%, applies a buff to you, recovering 10% of your HP, and creating a shield equal to 35% of your max HP that ignores cancel and pierce effects. In its base state, this is not good. This is a obelisk. I mean, it's okay. It's essentially not as good as an obelisk because this shield is not very good. It gets torn up so fast. The 10% heal is next to nothing. And then what you've got is guard break immunity, max HP, and recovery rate, which is okay, but you'd be better off with a really well-rolled PvP obelisk. So I did put Reforge mandatory /no, because with this CTP, you could reforge it and you could give it to some of your like more bottom tier PvP characters. Black Widow taking one for the team again, hanging out as sort of the bad PvP character example. You could reforge a Regeneration and give it to her. You could give it to someone like Echo. You could give it to someone like Apocalypse. But for someone like me, again, who's not gambling in the store, who's only getting the CTPs that I find and, get through free-to-play means, I will probably hang on to these for shoot for brilliance. I'd be more interested in rolling really nice obelisks and using those for my lesser PvP characters for AC and Team Battle Arena, and just saving these for brilliance and rerolls. I may change my mind on that at some point, but that's why I put mandatory /no. You may want to save these for rerolls. It'll be up to you. Moving on to the Judgement, the CTP for the elemental damage dealers. All basic attacks increase, chain hit damage increase, very nice. Activated proc, 10% chance when attacking, applies to enemies, decrease all resistances by 30%. Keep in mind, this doesn't apply in certain game modes. So there's only some places where you're going to be ripping resistance as far as I'm aware. It also applies to you. Increased damage to all elemental damage by 200% for 5 seconds. This sounds like a crazy percentage for a 5-second window, but because it's only increasing elemental damage, it's not quite the same as having a 200% damage window for 5 seconds. It evens out. This CTP can be equipped in its base form, does well, but does really well reforged into a mighty. We talked about the type amplification top stat that we can get on the Judgment. That is the preferred stat. And elemental damage dealers like Thor, Miles Morales, Human Torch, Ghost Rider, and Rogue are the type of characters that are going to benefit from a CTP of Judgment. Moving on to the Insight. Now we're getting into support CTP. These are a little different. This is going to give the character max HP, all basic defense increase. An activated proc, 10% chance when attacking, applies to all allies. Very important. This doesn't just apply to the character. If they strike and they trigger this, they will apply it to your main damage dealer if it's equipped to a support. Applies to all allies. Increase basic damage dealt to supervillains by 20%. Increase basic damage dealt to superheroes by 20% for 5 seconds. Basically, this is just a 20% damage increase, basic damage dealt increase, for 5 seconds that can be triggered from a support character on your main DPS. Only gets better if you reforge it. When you reforge, there's 2 different top stats you can get. One is based around boss damage, increased damage to bosses, and that's what you want for PvE. For PvP, there is a damage, I believe it might be pierce damage reduction, but there's a damage reduction top stat. And that's the one you'd want to go for if you were trying to double stack support CTPs for PvP, which I'll talk more about here in a second. For this one, however, since the Insight is technically a PvE CTP, even though you can double stack it in PvP, I did list PvE examples for supports that you could target with an insight. Valkyrie, Shuri, Morgan Le Fay, Nick Fury, really any of your good supports that you're using across multiple teams are a great target for an insight. All right, guys, next we got one more slide here, and this is going to be the two most recently added CTPs to the game. We've got coming in first, one of the big PvP bads, the CTP of Conquest. Let's break her down. Applies to self. Guard break immunity. We love guard break immunity. Recovery rate, plus 90%. That's always nice too. Activation rate when HP is below 50%. So an activated proc when our HP drops below 50. Applies to us. Recovers 10% of HP. There's that heal again. 20% increase of max HP for 6 seconds. Very nice. Also triggers the wall proc. Decreases damage received by 80%. Reduce damage decrease by 3% with each hit taken, with a minimum damage decrease of 60%. This lasts for 6 seconds. So what this means is basically when the wall proc activates, you get 80% damage reduction for 6 seconds. Every time you take a hit, that 80% is reduced by 3% until it's dropped down to 60% for the remainder of the 6 seconds. This is an incredible CTP. The survivability here is insane. This and the Greed are basically the two big PvP CTPs right now. Should you reforge this? Yeah, if you can. You absolutely should reforge this. The proc is incredible. Like I said, this is just one of the absolute awesome PvP CTPs right now. It's one of the newest ones to come out. Examples for this one. So, and I put these in order intentionally. Like I said, these aren't like a tier list, but Null and Sentry prefer a Greed. That's why they're down here on the end. Silver Surfer would love this. It's just survivability. It just lets him tank to reflect damage. Adam Warlock would love one of these. Bunch of survivability, keep him alive. Wolverine would do well with one of these. Again, ton of survivability, and the Clash adds damage basically. So you get all of this survivability plus a top stat that's dealing a bunch of extra damage. And then, of course, Sentry and Null on the end. Like I said, I think they both prefer Agreed at this point. Sentry, I'm a little less sure on. Null, I am sure you prefer Agreed. But I think both of them would perform really well if all you had was Conquest. What a terrible position that would be to be in, eh? All right, moving on to the last one here, guys. We've got the Liberation. This is the most recent CTP added to the game. This CTP gives us guard break immunity, the recovery rate increases all basic attacks and defenses by 28%, has an activated proc, 10% chance when attacking, applies to all allies, increases all damage dealt to all instincts by 20%. The effect that applies to all team members cannot be applied in duplicate. This is important. This means you can't use two CTPs of Liberation on two separate supports and have them both apply to the main damage dealer, right? If you reforge this, it just becomes better. For a PvP focus, it's got a damage reduction top stat. For a PvE focus, it's got increased damage top stat. You can use them accordingly. Again, this is technically, and I say that because it has guard break immunity and other relevant PvP stats, this is technically a PvP CTP. So for target examples, I put some of our PvP supports like Agent Venom, Colossus, Hela, and then I put White Fox here because I wanted to remind myself to talk to you guys about double stacking support CTPs. Alex mentions it all the time. You can have a character in either PvE or PvP with a Liberation and a character with an Insight in the same team, and those will stack. So for PvP, you can use a PvP rolled Insight on a support and a PvP rolled Liberation on a support, and double support someone like Null with massive buffs. However, this is kind of like an end game / spender territory kind of thing. That's why I kind of left it out of the main images here. And the same thing's true for PvE. You can roll the Liberation with the increased damage stat, equip it to someone like White Fox or Shuri or whoever, and then have an Insight on the other supports you're going to use. They will stack and both support your main DPS, allowing you to do a ton of damage. Wow, guys, that's all the CTPs. We made it. We got one more slide to look at, and you better believe it's just the tips. All right, guys, as we normally do, I'm just going to go over some basic tips for CTPs, CTP reforging, and all that. Some of this we touched on already, and we're just repeating it to drill it in there because some of this is really important. Just fire these off really quick because, by golly, this is going to be an hour-long video. Some obelisks are better than certain base CTPs. Know when to save fodder. We talked about this a bunch, but it's so important. See so many people equipping terrible CTPs because, well, I don't blame you for thinking you should equip your equipment, but now that we know how brilliants work, how they're re-rolled, how you reforge them, you're gonna wanna save these cruddy CTPs for fodder. This one's important. You can re-roll the bottom stats on a base CTP before reforging it to shoot for the chance that when you reforge, the bottom, when you reforge, the bottom stats aren't changed from the initial reforge, right? So if you roll good stats and then reforge, if you get the right top stats off that first roll, you have nailed it and you will have a perfect reforged CTP. A lot of people will do that because it's easier to just go for the obelisks, manipulate that bottom stat first, get the right stats on it, then go ahead and reforge. And if you hit that top stat, it's perfect. And if not, you can just re-roll from there. It's up to you whether you do this or not. It's kind of one of those things. Some people are going to like it. Some people aren't. I just wanted to let you guys know how that worked. Brilliant CTPs are very expensive to craft and re-roll. Please be careful when you decide to start reforging them. You need to know when it's time. If you don't have the CTPs or the CTP income to support rolling for brilliance and crafting brilliance, maybe just don't. I don't know when as a free-to-play. We're just over 3 months into the game now. I'm not sure when we're going to start rolling brilliance, but it's probably a long ways down the road. So just keep that in mind. Don't get yourself stuck with a brilliant CTP that you can't reforge, or excuse me, that you can't re-roll because you don't have other CTPs to feed it. Only reforge, this is huge. We talked about this, but I'm gonna repeat these. Only reforge for brilliance during super success chance up events. Don't. You need that. Trust me. This is painful enough as it is. Do not put yourself in the position where you're trying to roll for a brilliant without the 3 times chance. That's insane. Only reforge for brilliance with the max 21% success chance. Like I showed you, it increases more with the last 2 CTPs you put in. You would be absolutely shooting yourself in the foot by trying to roll with 2, 3, 4 CTPs for a brilliant. Just max it out to the 21%, save until you have enough bad CTPs to go for it if you're gonna go for it. Don't miss out on CTPs if you can help it, especially as a free to play. You will need them all. Log in every day if you can. I showed you guys every CTP I know how to throw a dart at to try and get, throw all the darts at all the chances. You miss every shot you don't take. And as free to play, we need to be taking them shots, baby. All right. And as a free to play, this is the last tip, and I kind of like this one. As a free to play, try to learn which characters stay in the meta. There are certain characters that are fan favorites or kind of net marble favorites that seem to always be getting a uniform, that seem to always kind of stay in the meta. If they fall out, it's for a couple months and then they jump right back in. These are characters that are worth prioritizing with CTPs if they're in the current meta. Because even if they fall out, it's likely they're going to come back around again. And as a free to play, you won't have to worry about unequipping and moving CTPs around as much. So some examples would be like Doctor Strange, Wolverine, Luna Snow, and Scarlet Witch. These are characters that are fan favorites and typically are meta all the time or just shy of getting a new uniform. All right, my friends. Wow, that was a long video. That was fun. I learned a lot making this. I hope you guys learned something watching it. If not, I hope you had fun watching it. If you did, leave a like for me. It goes a long way. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. I just want to take a second to thank everyone for all the support on this channel. We're creeping up on 2,000 subscribers here pretty soon, and I absolutely cannot believe all the love and support from you guys. Thank you all so much. If you want to see more of these guide videos, or you want to be notified about the live stream series that we're doing every day at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Means a lot. Thanks again for staying here for this whole video. I'm Olden Gray. This is Free to Play, and I hope you all have a spectacular day.